So we're going to edit these drums. It's multi-track drums. We're going to use flex time to edit them. But the key thing is, if I start flexing just the kick on its own, what we're going to do is find that the kick gets in time, but everything else is out of time. So suddenly all the mics are not lined up with each other anymore. And it's really important for a multi-mic'd instrument, whether it's drums or it could be a guitar. It could be your guitar part might include close mic and distant mic and a room mic. If you're editing the timing of that guitar part, all of those mics need to move if you move that time. They all need to move together. Otherwise, they're all going to sort of fall out of time and you're going to hear doubling, which is usually not desirable. So let's lock them all together. Those are the drum tracks. It's G kick, snare, room, floor tom, overhead, and snare bottom. Although the snare bottom doesn't actually, as always, I always record it, but sometimes don't actually use it. There's not much. I don't think there's anything on that snare bottom track. We'll include it anyway. Let's open up the mixer and highlight all of the drum tracks. And I'm going to assign them to a group. So the groups on the mixer are just above the automation read button. You can see there, group. So with them all selected, I'm going to click in one of the empty boxes and I'm going to send it to group 1. On the left-hand side, you should see the group editor ping open. I'm going to call that group drums. Notice it relabels it there. It's much better to have it labelled because numbers on their own don't really mean anything. Great, so they're all part of the drum group. Then we can decide how that group is going to be operating. All these little tick boxes we can choose for certain things to happen. For instance, if I grab one of the group members' faders and move it, notice they all move because now they're all locked in as part of the group. If I de-solo these and mute one, they all mute together. So you can choose what you want being grouped together. I often have solo as well, just because it's quite nice to be able to just solo one of the drums and it all solos. Record can be quite useful when you're in the studio tracking. Just means when you hit record on one of the drum tracks, they all go record enabled. Panning, if you want, it's all choices. The key one that for editing though is at the top, and you can see it says editing. If we check that box, both of these should be checked. What we want to make sure is that for editing, they all remain quantize locked. So that's the key one to choose. So make sure your drum group all have editing quantize locked audio. Quite often what happens is all your tracks then get this little Q, green Q button lit up. This is the quantize reference, the Q reference. I want it to quantize just on the close mic kick and the close mic snare top. The reason for that is, I'll show you, if we zoom in to look at a snare drum and a room mic, here we are. If I just zoom in here. So there's a snare hit just there. If I keep zooming in, I mean, when we're zoomed out, they look pretty close together, but if I zoom out, you can see there's actually a timing difference. There's the snare hitting at the close mic, and it takes a few milliseconds for it to reach the room mics. It's because of the size of the room, and we were talking about how slow sound travels through air. What you'll see when you zoom into your tracks is that your distant mics are actually quite far delayed. In fact, I've pulled this room forwards. Originally it was much further back. The room was here, so there's almost an echo. Because of that reason, because the room is delayed, that's fine. I don't want to bring the room forwards, but I don't want Logic to try and quantize to there, because then that's going to put everything else out of time. So I'm going to turn off quantize for that one, if that makes sense. So these little quantize buttons is you telling Logic which one you want Logic to reference for the quantize. So if we quantize the drums to 16ths, really I only want it to look at the snare top and the kick. Everything else will just follow. Does that make sense? So that's what the little quantize lock is. And it's because of the timing differences that we want that. So close mic kick, close mic snare. Those are the two key timing elements. Okay, well, next up, let's go into flex mode. So let's show flex. You can either click the button up there or Command F shows and hides. We see flex mode open. I'm going to choose, for my drums, I'm going to choose slicing. That tends to be the one that sounds the best on audio, especially drums, because what it does is it doesn't stretch the actual audio, it just slices it, and if there's gaps it will fill the gap, but it doesn't damage the audio too much. Rhythmic is the next best for drums. But I usually choose slicing first and see if that one works. So let's set that to slicing. Cool. So notice they all changed because they're part of the group now. They've all changed to slicing and flex has been enabled. So I'm going to have a look at this bar 65. I can hear that the drums are lagging there. If I solo the drums, remember they're in a group, solo one, they all solo, which is quite convenient. Let's turn click on. You can definitely hear that they're a little bit delayed. So that's the bit we're going to focus on, from bar 65 to bar 81. We can't see any of the warp markers yet. We have to zoom in a little bit more. There they are. It sort of hides them from you until you're at a zoom level that makes any sense. Really, I'm focusing on the kick and snare. Everything else is going to follow. And we can really see that quantized difference now. If I move, you can see where, with the room there, there's quite a big gap between the two. Let's have a look at how these line up. So we're going to line up the kicks and the snares against the ruler. Let's go back to the beginning. That second kick, look, that's quite far behind there. The first one is okay-ish. I'm going to move that first one back a bit though. It's a little bit, I can hear a little bit of a flam. So with the warp marker, if I click here, we can see that it's just one single marker. If I just move my mouse down below the center line, we get 3 warp markers. That's cool because what it does is, if I move it just with one, they might all move. But if I click here, it will put warp markers to the left hand and the right hand, so it locks them in place. So when I move this one, only that one moves. You can do the same again, just grab that one. I can see that was quite far away. Same again, let's just pull that back. Same again. You'll see it snaps to the place. That one's okay. The timing has got back on it, look. So it's pretty much lined up. But this one's still lagging a little bit. So let's pull that back. When I pull that back, notice all of the other ones are following. So I don't have to go through every single audio track. Notice where these are. If I pull it this way, they all chase. Because they're all locked. We don't have to worry about them all going out of time or anything. Let's just have a listen to that. That's much better. It's definitely locked in. If we turn off the click and have a listen to it with the synth. Yeah, that's feeling better. It's subtle, but it does make a big difference. So that's something to try. Give it a go. Now you can select all your drums in the mixer, assign them to the first available empty group, give the group a name. Drums obviously is a good one. And in the group settings, which appear on the left hand side, make sure that you've got editing and quantize locked audio selected. Then the final thing to do is turn off the Q reference, the little green Q button, for all except the close mic kick and the close mic snare. Once you've done that, you're ready to now start to tighten up the timing, which is then a case of going in, grabbing and pulling elements back in time until it looks good. You can do it by eye, and if you remember, above the middle line on an audio track you get a single warp marker, so that just puts a single one in, or below it you'll get 3, which will lock the beats where they are either side and allow you just to move the middle one. Oh, that one's quite late there. So is that one, so I'm just going to use 1 and bring it back. Pull these all back a little bit. That snare's a bit late. Let's pull that snare back. You can. I usually do the kick first and then see how it looks. Usually if you do the kick, the snare kind of sorts itself out if it's dragging, because they're all moving together. But yeah, that's looking pretty good. Maybe that one to move. Some of these are bang on, so you don't even have to move them, which is great. That one's a bit late.